But as I ponder the idea of serving beyond one's work, I think about a young Georgia graduate landscaping contractor who was raising a young family up in Gordon County back in the early 2000s. Tom Graves, who's now your United States Congressman, was busy making payroll, taking care of clients, getting his feet muddy most days of the week, serving beyond just the things he has to do as a business owner. It was someone that challenged Tom in 2002, you know, Tom, you've got an opportunity to step out there and have a much bigger impact than you're able to have now if you'll take the risk, kind of put your head above the foxhole, be willing to take some bullets, take some fire, get outside your comfort zone and serve beyond your work in a way that perhaps you never had before. His wife, Julie, had been involved in a crisis pregnancy center ministry up in their community in Calhoun, and Tom made that decision in early 2002 to get involved, ran for the state house, and was elected in his first campaign in 2002, and what would become an historic year across Georgia for people who share my values, Tom's values, and many of the values of the people in this room. Through that service, I actually had the honor to serve with Tom for 5 years in the Georgia House before he ran for Congress, was elected in the 2010 cycle, or a little before the 2010 cycle through a special election. And I will tell you this, as I introduce Tom Graves, your congressman, to you, I will tell you the one thing I use as a measuring stick for elected officials is I look at them and evaluate their service and their being worthy of my support. I look at people who've been willing to suffer in politics to do the right thing. Have they been willing to take heat to do the right thing? Because for those who serve in public office, you take heat from the political left, you take heat from the political right, sometimes you take heat from the political center, which sometimes can be the most aggressive attacks of all, but you take heat from every direction in politics. But the people who are willing to suffer themselves politically to do the right thing are the people that earn my deep respect and affection. And that Tom Graves, having served for 5 or 6 years in the Georgia House, earned that. I can tell you there was no decision on my part who I was going to support in this congressional race, and he's a person that I count not just as a personal friend, but I'm honored to call him a U.S. Congressman and share with you that your congressman, somebody who I've seen when no one was looking, off the camera, out of the public spotlight, did the right thing and was willing to suffer for it and take personal hits to serve his constituencies and the principles that he represents. So as I represent your congressman, I will say this. The only thing I'm going to have to pull a note out for is the service. Tom, in the last couple years, has taken on a chairmanship of a subcommittee of appropriations in Congress. You know, there are 12 congressmen that are referred to as cardinals. They are the subcommittee appropriations chairs that really manage the federal budget, and Tom is one of those 12 subcommittee chairs. He's the chairman of the subcommittee on financial services and general government. So of all the things Tom does in Washington, his direct responsibility is to be the leader within the U.S. House for the budget process and if anyone's taking notes, this is going to be a long list here, Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary, the Department of Treasury, the White House, which could be interesting and increasingly interesting these days, the General Services Administration, Small Business Administration, FCC, FDIC, bankers, did you hear that, FDIC? FEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, National Labor Relations Board, and the Federal Trade Commission. So as the chair of that role, Tom is really in the centerpiece of much of what's happening in Washington and the service that they deliver to us, our constituents, our employees, our clients. And in addition to that, Tom serves on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee and the Subcommittee for Appropriations for Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. So as an appropriator in Washington and somebody who I've witnessed doing the right thing all the time when no one's looking, it is my deep honor to introduce to you my friend, Tom Graves, who's going to be our luncheon speaker.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Y'all are kind. Y'all are kind. Ed, thank you so much. That's It's a great surprise for me to have Ed, a dear friend of mine, who served with me in the General Assembly, to introduce me today. And it's humbling to listen to all of that, because I think all of us know that sometimes you do a lot in life and you move past that, and when folks remind you of the journey you've been on, it brings back a lot of memories, and a lot of good memories and some tough memories too at times, right, Ed? And I know the Senator feels the same, and others in here who have served or are serving. And I think you being here today, I see Howard out here, whether you've been elected, thought about being elected, or have attempted to be elected, in some capacity, whether or not any of those, you are serving your community in some way here today, just by being here in each and every day, whether it's as a parent, as a brother, a sister, or as a business leader, CEO. We all have service capacities. This just happens to be mine right now, which involves a lot of darts and arrows, it seems like, especially when you oversee the budget of the White House, right? OMB, he didn't mention IRS. I was surprised about that one. That's another one we oversee. You talk about something interesting. Under my chairmanship, they are now at, let's see, 2008 levels of funding, I think, the IRS, and they're not real happy about that right now. So let me start off by saying, on behalf of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and Vice President Mike Pence, I'm going to tell you, they send their greetings. They send their greetings today. I'm serious about this. No matter, and we're going to talk today, we're going to have a little fun today. We're going to talk about reality. We're going to talk about perception. But there's one thing that's certain, is that President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence get up every day with one goal in mind. And it's not a tweet. One goal in mind, and that is America first. America first. Make no mistake about that. And it's tough to watch. There's no question. There's a lot of forces out there that don't like the ideas or the concepts of putting America first and what it means to do that. But this president has not shied away from that, as you have seen, I'm sure. But before we talk about some policy stuff, there's another group that puts America first every day that I feel like deserves additional recognition. That's our law enforcement. Every day, yes, you're right. Thank you. And they're here today. Every day they put our communities first. And I thought about this the other day, that, you know, we sleep well at night. And it's this sense of security that we have because they are willing to protect us, but their families are the ones not sleeping well at night because they're putting our communities first. So know this, men and women in blue, it's a new day in Washington. We got your back. This president's got your back. This vice president's got your back. And this community's got your back. So thank you again for all you do for us. So to Shelba, thanks for the invitation. We didn't know if I'd be here, right? To the interim, where's the interim president, who is now chairman? He cycled out, right? And we have, thank you for your service. We appreciate Georgia Power and their sponsorship, and certainly Croft and their sponsorship today. And the new president, Stacy, thank you for stepping forward and leading this great group. This is an amazing group. I've had a chance to spend time with you for many years now, but even today, we had a little fun today. I got to spend the morning with Mr. Thigpen and at the bank, speaking about some banking issues and local politics. Brian Stover, of course, he may be here too. He's been a long time committed business owner here, but the small business owners, right? And then Brian Dobbs, we had a little fun earlier. We had a little fun, didn't we? If you don't know what he does in business, you ought to go by and see him. He's got a pretty cool business, small business owner. I asked him about his family, though. I don't know if I should share this. I know we're being videoed here, but I said, so you grew up in Paulding County? He said, well, yeah, I married my wife in pre-K. She's here. Thanks for joining us today. But look, your chamber's been heavily involved. They've joined me in Washington, D.C. to talk about the issues that are very important, whether it's economic developments or local issues, whether it's the reservoir, and as we've been able to move forward on it, whether it's the exchange, the interstate exchange out on I-75. And we're working together. We have a good team. And we're working together as a team because it takes that. And you've got good leadership here. Chairman, thank you for your leadership and all you've done to move this community forward. And what we all know has been a tough couple of years, no doubt. So I'm delighted to join you. Before I get into my remarks, though, let me give you a family update. So Julie started teaching today. Well, I shouldn't say started. Today's our first day teaching this year, pre-K. So God bless all the teachers out there today. But my family's grown a little bit, Ed. I don't know if you know this. I have, first let me ask this question. Who in here has a student starting college for the first time this year? Anybody here? Okay, we got a couple. Who in here has a student starting high school for the first time? Okay, so we got a few of those. All right, how many of you have both? One starting college and one starting high school. Oh, we have one. Any others? Okay. Are both of them daughters? Both sons. Well, mine are both daughters. That's life in the Graves household right now. I have a daughter starting at Georgia Tech in a week and a half. So for Tech fans, Georgia Tech. And then I have a daughter starting high school for the first time today, 14-year-old. And then, but I do have a son in the middle. He's a senior this year. So the Graves household is full speed ahead. For those that think that I might live in D.C. and the kids go to school somewhere else, no. My wife teaches at Sonoraville at Redbud Elementary, and my kids go to Sonoraville High School, and Joanne's going to Georgia Tech. So we're with you. And this is a fun time of year. When we're coming here today, we have to recalculate our travel time right now because of school buses and students and such. But so as I talk about my family, I took Julie and my youngest daughter to see Spider-Man last weekend. So have y'all seen Spider-Man yet? Good movie. I recommend it. Good movie. And as we were sitting there before the movie, and we don't go to many, but as we were sitting there, a lot of previews were being played, and I'm one of those, I really like the previews because they're neat. They're mini movies. You get to see them. You get a glimpse into the future of what something might be. And as I was watching those previews, it occurred to me, I said, most of these movies I'll probably never see, and if I did see them, the thing about previews, they never turn out quite as good as the preview, right? Well, that was last week in Congress. The movie didn't turn out the way the preview was explaining. So let me speak to healthcare for a second. I'm in the House, and sorry, Senator, but the House did their job earlier this year. And thank you, Virginia. And look, our two senators, they did their job. They voted every opportunity they could to rescue American families from a failing healthcare system right now. But there were a couple others that didn't. And so I'm disappointed in what happened last week, and my expectation is the Senate should get the job done. Get the job done. We have moved on as a House. We're moving into tax reform next. That's our next priority, and so we can talk about that today. So I am disappointed, and here's why. Because this should not be a political issue at all. And unfortunately, it's turned into Republicans against Barack Obama of the past, or Republicans and Democrats. But I don't know if you know this in here, but families are really hurting right now because of health care. And it's remarkable. And they're not just Republican families, I'll remind you. This is all families. I'll give you some stories. I had a young man who has a family, 2 kids and a wife, family of 4, in my office. And he came just to bring his invoice of health care. Now, this is a real-life story. This isn't some made-up anecdote of make-believe person or family. $1,932 a month. Healthy family. He only has one choice, one option. That was it. And I was like, goodness, that's amazing. I said, what's your deductible? $7,500 per person. Now look, I'm a public school student, but I can do the math on that one. $30,000 a year his family has to come out of pocket before health care coverage covers them. He has a card. He has an insurance card. That's it. And he looked at me, distraught, and said, what am I to do? I can't afford this. But he's not alone. 19 million Americans last year chose to pay the IRS a penalty instead of purchasing something they didn't want, that didn't meet the needs of their family, and they couldn't afford. And guess what? They still don't have health insurance. Met with a doctor earlier this week. He says, when are y'all going to get that done? I'm thinking, well, you're a doctor. I don't know that it'd impact you. He says, do you know what my insurance is? This is a doctor. I never thought about a doctor's perspective. Usually they don't like the lawyers. Now they're like, let me tell you the insurance side of it. $1,600 a month for he and his wife. $13,000 deductible. That's real. And he's like, I don't know what we're going to do. He's a small business owner, right? A small practice it's just a small business owner, not some big-time doctor at some big-time hospital covered by some big-time plan. No, this is real. It's story after story after story. In fact, a young lady stood up in a meeting earlier this week and said, can I tell you my Obamacare story? And I thought, oh, here we go. Here we go. And she said, I'm on it. I'm on Obamacare. Me and my husband. We're in our 60s, pay over $2,000 a month for Obamacare. And it's not covering us. I was at another group meeting, and a journalist came up to me and said, can I tell you my story? Tells me their story, and their medications, nearly $1,000 a month, and the insurance doesn't cover it, but it did before. It doesn't now. Can't get their medication. These are real stories that are impacting real families. This is something that has to get done. We have to put American families first. We have to put politics aside. Everybody wants to ask, is this going to be bipartisan? Is it not? This should just be an American thing. Ask yourself this question that somebody asked me the other day. That is, what was the problem we were trying to fix? Go back 8 years. Because people are starting to ask themselves that question right now. What was this? What was the problem? And you remember what it was? There were 30 million uninsured persons in our country, right? A large portion of the populations were unlawfully here. A large portion of that population, the remaining population just says, I don't want insurance. Another large portion of that population said, I have access to it. I just choose not to sign up for it. And then there was another group of the population that just didn't know they had access to it under Medicaid or Medicare and just hadn't signed up. That was the original problem that was to be solved that now has evolved into something totally different where American families are truly, truly hurting. So we've got to get this done. That's a lot about health care, but that's an important issue, and I know it impacts businesses here today. But let's talk about some encouraging stuff. Have y'all watched the news lately? Don't you feel so uplifted? Everything's so good, isn't it? There's something going on in the media right now. And maybe it's sensationalism, maybe it's entertainment, but it sure is not news. It is not news. What is being reported out of some of these, what we're referring to now as the deep state media, it's as if they're racing to the bottom. Have you noticed they're not doing anything to show how somebody might succeed, but instead they're promoting anything and everything that would help somebody fail? When did we devolve to something like that as a society in which now news has become something in which we hope to see somebody's going to fail or some group's going to fail? But there's been so much going on. This has been such a positive time in Washington that you would never know about. It's almost as if we're in a couple of different dimensions. There is the reality in which work is being done, and then there's what's being reported, which is something very different oftentimes. It's almost turned into reality TV news. You notice that? Yeah, it's just reality TV news. It's the who's up, who's down. It's palace intrigue and drama, Inquirer kind of stuff, Star News. But guess what? Things are happening in Washington. This has, in fact, been the most productive Congress in modern history. It's hard to believe, isn't it? You hear there's gridlock, nothing's getting done, a bunch of bums, all this kind of stuff. Most productive Congress in modern history. More bills have passed out of the House of Representatives in the first 6 months of this year than at any of the last 4 presidents on their first year. This president has signed more bills into law in his first 6 months of being president than any of the last 4 presidents in their first 6 months. And do you know that in order to sign a bill into law, it has to pass the House and the Senate? That means it's bipartisan. I don't know why they're not reporting on that. And of those, they're pretty powerful pieces of legislation. Remarkable things have occurred. Do you know that we funded the government in April which is a good sign, right? We've been known not to do that once, at least. We funded the government in April. President Trump signed into law the largest investment in military spending in a decade for our men and women who are serving our country. Largest increase in a decade. Yes, they deserve that, do they not? Signed into law. Done. Then just last week, we passed the follow-up to that, the addition, the supplemental to that, for the military, $68 billion of investment to rebuild our military. The largest rebuild effort since Ronald Reagan was president occurred last week. Do they not deserve that? Do our men and women in uniform not deserve that? Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to present medals to a family of a World War II veteran. And I know Dr. Melton's here, and she's sitting back there. And this wasn't even in my notes until I saw you earlier. But and she mentioned to me what a neat moment that was. As we were in our office, my office, and her father served in World War II, served in the Army for 3 years. But he was real shy, and you'll find this from veterans. They oftentimes don't tell you what they've done, the journeys they've been on, the missions, or their assignments. She didn't know a whole lot. She just knew that he had served, and obviously that he was a hero. And so I had the opportunity to share with the family his medals that he once had but got burnt, and they lost him as a family. And so she had the grandkids there, and her I guess kids there, and your husband. And, as I'm doing that, and it's an emotional time, especially World War II veterans. And, the highlight, though, of the family was he got the Good Conduct Medal, right? Can you imagine that grandfather getting a Good Conduct Medal? The Victory Medal of World War II, a rifleman, a bayonet medal, all these different medals that now they have as a family. And to think that for the last 8 to 10 years, the legacies of these families and those serving currently has been discounted in some way because we wouldn't invest in our military, well, guess what? It's a new day. This president's making our defense of this nation, our military men and women, the number one priority, and it was out of the gate. That is good news. That is such good news. So then in April at the same time, you remember the border wall? $1.5 billion passed through the House, the Senate, signed into law by the president to the initial investment into our border security, investment into border patrol, investment into surveillance, investment into technology to set up the construction that we just passed last week, $1.6 billion for construction of the border wall to secure our country. This isn't about immigration reform. Don't kid yourself. This is not immigration reform. This is national security. And it should be that. It shouldn't be a political issue. We should all be for securing our country. And this is a step forward. But again, it was maybe it was a blip on the radar because it didn't meet the sensationalized news reports. Did you hear the news tell you that illegal immigration is down 60% this year compared to this time last year? Illegal border crossings are down 60%. What's happened in the last year? What's the one thing that's happened? There's a new administration in town. So a lot is going. How about, big government? Business is not in favor of big government. 150 programs, initiatives have been eliminated, rescinded, or combined and pushed away. Big government slowing down. That was a commitment by the president. Right out of the gate, President Trump signed an executive order. I love this one because I know when we were running back in 2002, and I know many of the candidates here, we said, you know what, for every law we pass, we need to repeal a law. Y'all remember that? Well, the president came in and said, hey, I'll one-up you. For every regulation we put in place, we're going to take 2 out. 800 rules and regulations have been eliminated in the last 6 months from the federal government. In fact, the net effect on businesses by regulations from this administration in the first 6 months of this term is negative. Negative $22 million is the net effect on businesses. Contrast to the last 5 months of the Barack Obama administration, cost businesses $6.8 billion. That's the contrast that is occurring from rules and regulations and policy, big government versus a more streamlined, sensible government that is putting American businesses first, putting America first, putting American first. What about Supreme Court? Remember, we had a vacancy. Now we have an amazing Supreme Court justice there, Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch. That is great to fulfill the court, to put a great replacement of Justice Scalia in there. But you don't hear a whole lot about that anymore either. It's not newsworthy. The VA. Anybody ever had a question about the VA? Veterans Administration. Two significant things have happened in the last 6 months. Number one, President Trump has already signed a bill into law that says that the administrator of the Veterans Administration has the authority, of which they did not have before, has the authority to fire and get rid of any employee that's not carrying out the duties that they're required to do. That is huge. Common sense in the business world, right? Well, guess what? You got a business leader in the White House now. Last week we passed the Choice Act, amending the Choice Act to further it so that veterans actually have a choice in health care. That they have the opportunity not just to go to the VA, but maybe they have the opportunity to go to somebody of their choice in their local community. That is a plus for veterans. We've got to take care of veterans. And then we heard a little bit about tax reform. President Trump's put forward the tax reform proposal, put it on a little card about this big. Can you imagine filing your taxes like that? Wouldn't that be nice? Here's what I made, here's my charitable deductions, here's my home mortgage deduction, and here's what's left. Tax me at 1 and 3 rates, and I'm done. Wouldn't that be nice? No more love letters from the IRS. You got to love the letters from the IRS. If you haven't gotten them, wait. They're coming, it seems like. But look, this is just a few of the things that I want to share with you that are positive because there's a reason for it. And I know maybe it sounds partisan to you, and forgive me if it does, because it's not. I don't mean it to be partisan. This is what is happening versus the perception of what is being displayed to you. But it matters, and here's why it matters. In the last 6 months, 850,000 new jobs have been created in this country. Now, we can give credit where we want to give it, but the truth is 850,000 jobs have been created. Maybe it's from rules and regulations being eliminated. Maybe it's because we passed something. Maybe it's because we didn't pass something. I don't know. All I know is they've been created. And what does that mean for us? That means that now 850,000 people, since January 20th, have purpose and dignity through work that they didn't one day before. They now have the opportunity to take care of their family. They're that father that just sort of didn't have that feeling as a father he knew he needed to have to take care of his family, now has that feeling of purpose again in taking care of his family, that example to his son or his daughter of what the role of the man should be in the house. It's now there. We still have a ways to go. But 850,000 new people have that purpose and that dignity. In fact, unemployment's down to a level not seen in the last 10 years. Consumer confidence is up like up the highest it's been in 10 years. Manufacturing confidence is up the highest it's been in like 20 years. You can just go down the list and list of all the confidence indexes, and they're up. And that is good. And you know it too. You probably feel it, don't you? You feel it out there a little bit out in the community. You don't know how to put your finger on it, but you feel something. You know what you feel? It's the American dream. It's hope. It's a chance. I might do it this time. I remember 4 and 5 years ago, I'd go around and I'd ask anybody, who here has a dream, right? There weren't a lot of hands going up then. The hands are starting to pop up now. There's a belief in this country that is different today. Maybe it's unassociated to politics and partying. It really doesn't matter. It's there. And that is exciting. And it's all happening in spite of what we see in the media. So I'm going to close with this, and I know that you may want to take some questions. But I heard this story given recently, and I think it's applicable here. It was a story of a family going on a vacation. They were on a sailboat going from California coast towards Hawaii, going across the Pacific. And the sun set there. So just sort of imagine yourself in this situation. The sunset's going, they're going as a family. But as the sun's starting to to go down. The storm clouds are coming up, and so they're trying to figure this out. What do they do as a family? And so they began preparing for the storm. You can imagine what you would do, right? You would, okay, let's put things up, let's batten the hatches. But the winds start to blow, and then they realize, okay, we got to start putting on some life vests. We don't know what's going to happen here. So imagine being in that situation where you got your family, and things are getting a little tough. The waves are tossing them, and eventually it tosses the boat over and it capsizes, and your family's cast out. Imagine what you would do. But as the family's out there, they're grabbing onto whatever they have. A shark shows up, of course, right? And so, as a dad, I don't know what I would do, but one has to imagine, what would you do? Sharks start circling. And this story and this account is being given to a class of students. And the presenter says, what would you do in that situation? And one little hand goes up, and he calls on this little girl, and the little girl says, well, that's easy. I know what I would do. And he said, what? She said, I'd stop imagining. And there's truth to that, right? Sometimes we've got to stop imagining the worst. There are a lot of little boys and girls getting on school buses today that aren't imagining what's going on in Washington. They're not imagining the worst. They're imagining tomorrow. They're imagining who their teacher's going to be, what they might learn and grow up to be in life. There are a lot of businesses that open their doors today imagining a new customer coming in. We have to stop imagining the worst. And it takes a little girl like that sometimes to just break us out of that trance because it gets fed to us. So my advice to you would be, if you're starting to imagine the worst, the answer is simple. Number one, stop imagining. Number two, just turn the TV off. Thank you for letting me join you. God bless you. Thanks. Thank you. Now, I'm not, oh, you're kind. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know there might be 1, 2, or 3 questions that I'm under contract to take from Shelba. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Sure. So last week, the House continued what was called the Veterans Choice Act, and which I think is really, it's landmark, quite frankly. And we passed it a couple of years ago, and Barack Obama actually signed it into law. The original version was a little bit more free market. The version I support actually is one in which says veterans should have the opportunity to go to whatever physician, whatever provider that they feel comfortable with, and the federal government should reimburse that provider or that physician, rather than the veteran always having to go to a VA clinic or go to a veterans hospital. Obviously, they could have that choice if they chose, choice being, so for Ed and Micah and the senator here, we might think that it's just a little bit like school choice in a way, right? But this is veterans. You get your choice. Go do what's comfortable for you. And so the Obama administration scaled it back originally, and they said, no, we only want veterans to be able to do that when they can't get service or care at the VA. That was the original version. We're beginning to open that back up to provide more. And a good reason for that is I met, speaking of World War II veterans, I met a World War II veteran just the other day who's in a wheelchair. And you have to ask yourself, how do we as a federal government expect a World War II veteran who's in his 90s to travel to Atlanta or Chattanooga or wherever it might be? It doesn't make sense. And aren't we like in the 21st century? Can't we do things a little bit different? So that's what we're working towards. In addition to the Make America Secure Act that we passed last week, added additional funding for veteran services. And in fact, we saw that in Jasper yesterday, or the day before yesterday, it was announced that a VA clinic was opening in Jasper, so we're going to start seeing that happen. Yeah, thank you. Paulette, yes.
Thank you. So I want to appreciate, I want to say thank you for signing on to our compact balance budget amendment resolution last year. We're writing it again. Can you tell me, it seems like there's some movement finally going on with looking at balanced budget amendments at the looking at hearing a couple weeks ago on that. And can you tell me like what movement you're seeing with like congressional and state initiative? And I appreciate your contribution.
Yeah, so, the balanced budget movement is something that I've been supportive of since I've been in Congress, and it's real simple, and it's like we should like balance our budget. It's not that hard. The state of Georgia does it. It's an important fiscal constraint that you put on government that businesses have to comply with, families have to comply with. There are those constraints there. The federal government is not that. It has zero constraint. The interesting debate in Washington is, how do you balance a budget? There's two ways you can balance a budget. One is you can decrease spending, right? That sounds pretty simple. The other is you can increase revenue. Translate that to tax increase. So you'll have many of one party that says, hey, I'm for a balanced budget amendment. Let's just raise taxes. That'll balance the budget. We don't change spending. We just raise the revenue. Well, we all know what happens then. It comes out of hardworking families all across our country instead of really focusing on the priorities. So as the balanced budget amendment debate goes through, it's real important that we tie our spending to GDP growth, or that we limit how a budget can be balanced, and it cannot be done through tax increases. That is more about economic growth. It's more about spending reduction, fiscal constraint, mandatory spending, various reforms, and a lot of the programs that are on autopilot. You may not be familiar with this, but about 66% of all federal government spending happens without Congress ever voting on it. It's in autopilot, and it is cruising faster and faster every day. And that's something we need to change. It really is. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
One thing that really concerns me that I don't think been addressed here today is the billions of dollars of student loan debt. A lot of it high interest. Is that anything that's been discussed in the halls of Congress? I mean, these kids, these millennials, some of them have tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that they'll never pay off. I just wonder if there's any solutions that are being discussed.
Yeah, the first solution is that students need to have a full awareness of a contract they're entering into. That is the number one solution. I'm an advocate for full disclosure. I believe a student should be able to see what the cost of college is in a timely manner. And I can say this as a parent who's going through this right now. It's really hard to find some of this stuff out. How much does it cost? And how much financial aid would you get? And where are all that kind of stuff. It's really confusing to navigate. But students need full disclosure. They need to know, how much is this college going to cost? How much will it cost if I finance it? What is the rate going to be? But you know what else they need to know is, what's the return on investment? Is the career path that I'm seeking, does it line up with the debt I'm about to incur? For example, a lot of schools take an Ivy League school, liberal arts school, $250,000, $260,000 degree. You get a liberal arts degree. I don't know if students know what that pays compared to what they just borrowed. The very same school, though, you could get a dynamic degree that earns twice as much, maybe. And so I think we owe it to students to see more disclosure, but that's probably more of a state level item. But I'm not one for artificial rates, for holding down rates. I believe that students, there's a cost to going to school, and it's an investment in your career, and that is, well, you're the collateral. As a dad, that's what I told my daughter. You're the collateral. I'm not. And so as a father, I just my kids have known from early on that they're responsible for tuition, wherever it takes them, and they've been very responsible with that side of it. So when Joanne starts Georgia Tech in a couple of weeks, she's put the deposits down. She's saved her money. She's paying. Yeah. That might be it. Yes, Micah. One more here. Yeah. Yeah, good point. So Georgia has a rich history of influence on national policy, whether it's Saxby Chambliss or John Lewis, Martin Luther King, Zell Miller, Johnny Isakson, obviously. But today is really pretty fantastic. Dr. Tom Price is Secretary of Health and Human Services. Former Governor Sonny Perdue is now Secretary of Agriculture. One of Paulding County's own is legislative or legal counsel for the president, Stefan Pastantino. Isn't that remarkable? How about Nick Ayers? Anybody know Nick Ayers? Do y'all remember Nick Ayers when he was just a little one? He was driving, the first time I met him was in Pickens County. He was driving then long shot candidate Sonny Perdue around to be governor of the state of Georgia. And he had to be in his early 20s, if not teens, late teens. Now he is chief of staff to the vice president of the United States. That's Georgia. And then my own, out of my personal office, many of you have worked with Morgan Joyce. She was my executive assistant for the last 2.5 years. Now is deputy assistant to the scheduling for the Secretary of State. And then you look at our delegation. You know, the not so bright spot is that I'm the dean of the delegation, if that was it. But Karen Handel being added to our delegation is a fantastic addition. The first Republican woman elected to Congress from the state of Georgia occurred just a month and a half ago. And she's doing a great job. She's on the Judiciary Committee. She's on Education and Workforce Committee. But our delegation, and I'll close with this because I appreciate you bringing it up because it's really neat what we've done. Our delegation has a commitment that we will not seek positions of committee positions that are not of value and of interest and influence for our state. And in fact, we put our own personal interest aside, our own district interest aside, and it's a commitment to say, let's get to the places in which we can, with the influence we have, to have the greatest influence for our state. And as a result of that, I'm on appropriations. You have Doug Collins is on rules and judiciary, and he's also fifth or sixth in seniority on our leadership team because elected leadership. He's the vice chairman of our conference. You have Drew Ferguson's transportation and on budget, and ed and workforce. Rick Allen is ed and workforce and agriculture. Austin Scott's agriculture and armed services. You can just go down the list, and it is neat. And Rob Woodall's on transportation as well. Buddy Carter's energy and commerce. So we have positioned ourselves in a way just to have the strongest impact. What's interesting is you look at my committee assignment on defense, on appropriations. I don't have a defense installation in our district, but we have 9 in the state of Georgia. None are in my district, but there's 9 in our state, and they cover every branch. They do everything from cyber to Army to Rangers to this to that. They're everything. But what's neat is that I can do my job without being parochial. It can be about our state, not about a district, and that's sort of how we've positioned ourselves. So thanks for bringing it up. You should be very proud of your Georgia delegation, and we work well even with our Democrat counterparts. There's 4 Democrats, 10 Republicans, and John Lewis hosted a dinner for us last week. So we might disagree on policy, but we've got great respect for one another. Thank you for bringing that up. Well, thanks for having me.